The heir of a noble family is plagued by dark visions of the future, while a war for control of the most valuable asset in the galaxy ensues and draws the family into the conflict. Welcome to Recap Planet. Spoilers ahead, so be prepared. A Fremen woman named Chani opens the story by recounting a portion of her people's history on the desert planet Arrakis. She explains that the planet has been under the cruel rule of the Harkonnens for as long as she can remember. The Harkonnens have grown immensely wealthy by harvesting the psychogenic substance known as melange, or spice. The Fremen have been attempting to expel the Harkonnens from the planet without success. Recently, however, the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV ordered the Harkonnens to leave Arrakis, leaving Chani wondering who the new rulers will be. On the planet Caladan, Paul Atreides has breakfast with his mother, Lady Jessica, who is Duke Leto's concubine. Lady Jessica is a member of the quasi-religious order of the Bene Gesserit and has been attempting to teach Paul the special powers of her order. She tests Paul by having him try to use his powers to compel her to pass him a glass of water. Paul is only partially successful. Lady Jessica then tells Paul about the planet Arrakis and its people. She explains that the planet is the only source of the psychoactive spice, which is crucial for interstellar travel since it allows navigators to plot faster than light jumps by folding space-time. Leto Atreides, along with soldier Gurney Halleck and Mentat Thufir Hawat, receives an imperial envoy who formalizes the awarding of Arrakis to House Atreides. The Emperor fears Leto's growing political power and popularity in the Landsraad, a conclave of noble houses. Leto recognizes that his appointment to oversee Arrakis is a trap of some kind, but he cannot refuse an imperial offer. Paul Atreides requests that his friend, the elite soldier Duncan Idaho, take him to Arrakis weeks ahead of time to scout things out. However, Duncan refuses Paul's request. Paul tells Duncan that he has been having dreams about Arrakis and the Fremen, including one in which Duncan falls in battle. Duncan dismisses this as merely a dream, telling Paul that everything important happens when we're awake. Paul discusses his desire to travel to Arrakis early with his father, but Leto denies him, stating that he requires Paul by his side. Leto explains the political situation, where the Emperor has instigated a war between House Atreides and House Harkonnen. This war will weaken both houses, which will benefit the Emperor. Instead, Leto plans to create an alliance with the Fremen to use their desert power to outsmart the Emperor. Paul expresses his doubts about his ability to take over his father's role as a leader. Leto, in response, shares his own doubts when he was young and assures Paul that he will find his way to leadership, just as Leto did. Gurney engages in a sparring session with Paul and urges the young ducal heir to be more cautious of the danger posed by the Harkonnens and to be more ruthless in battle. Paul starts having dreams of Chani. Jessica's Bene Gesserit superior, Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim, comes to Caladan to test Paul. Before the meeting, Sook Dr. Wellington Ua inspects Paul and warns him that the Bene Gesserit have their own agenda. Mohayim subjects Paul to the Gom Jabbar test, which involves using a poisoned needle and a pain-inducing box to assess his character. After the test, Mohayim inquires about Paul's dreams and whether they ever come true. After the test, Mohayim criticizes Jessica for giving birth to a son for Duke Leto instead of the daughter she had been instructed to produce. She alleges that Jessica believes her son might be the Kwisatz Haderach, a prophecy that the Bene Gesserit Messiah will fulfill. Jessica confirms this belief, but Mohayim warns her that Paul's abilities are not fully developed and that he may die in the upcoming trials. When Mohayim leaves, Paul confronts his mother about what Mohayim meant. Jessica explains that the Bene Gesserit have been involved in a selective breeding program for hundreds of years to create a remarkable mind that can see both the past and the future. Upon arriving on Arrakis, the locals begin chanting a phrase that Paul doesn't recognize. When he asks his mother about it, she tells him that it is a local prophecy about the Lisan al-Gaib, a prophesied messiah on Arrakis who is said to be the voice from outer world. While the Bene Gesserit thinks Paul might be this figure, Paul dismisses it as mere superstition. Jessica hires a Fremen servant named Shadout Mapes who sees Jessica and Paul as a fulfillment of the Lisan al-Gaib prophecy. Mapes gives Jessica a dagger made from the tooth of Shai Hulud, the giant sandworms that make the desert of Arrakis so dangerous. One night, while studying a holographic image of the Muad'Dib desert mouse, Paul survives an assassination attempt by a hunter-seeker drone when Mapes enters the room, distracting it. Leto discovers that the Harkonnens have sabotaged much of the needed infrastructure on Arrakis. They decide to take the issue to the Imperial Arbiter of the Transition, Leet Kynes, an ecologist who has been on Arrakis for years. Duncan Idaho returns from living with the Fremen for several weeks and reports to the Duke that the Fremen are unmatched fighters who live in communities known as Sieks in caverns beneath the desert. Duncan confirms Thufir Hawat's belief that there are many more Fremen than previously believed. Stilgar, the leader of one of these Sieks, comes to meet with Leto and demands that the Outworlders do not travel beyond the city except to mine spice. Leto refuses but insists that the CX will remain inviolate, and the Fremen will not be hunted while the Atreides rule. Paul invites Stilgar to stay, but he leaves. Duncan introduces the Atreides to some Fremen technology, including the moisture-saving still suits and thumpers, which are used to attract sandworms. Leto's party meets with Leet Kynes to investigate the spice mining operations. She inspects their still suits and finds that Paul has intuitively fitted his still suit in the Freeman's manner. In the native language, she says, "He shall know your ways as if born to them." The party flies out to observe a spice mining operation. The mining vehicle, called a sandcrawler, has attracted a worm drawn by the rhythmic vibrations of the crawler as it collects the spice. When a flying carryall fails to remove the mining vehicle, Duke Leto lands his small squad of ornithopters nearby to rescue the miners. When Paul gets out to guide the miners inside, he is hit with a massive dose of spice and has a series of visions, including one of himself with Chaney. He is almost sucked down into the sand with the crawler when Gurney grabs him and hauls him aboard his father's ornithopter. The two watch as the worm's enormous, toothed maw opens and swallows the sandcrawler whole. Later, Dr. Yue examines Paul and tells him and his mother that the spice is psychoactive but shouldn't harm Paul. Duke Leto wakes up in the middle of the night with a sense that something is wrong. He tries to contact security but gets no response. When he investigates, he finds his trusted doctor, Mapes, murdered. Before he can do anything, he is shot with a paralytic dart that goes through his body shield and leaves him helpless. It is revealed that Dr. Yue is a traitor and has disabled the communication systems and lowered the shields. He confesses that the Harkonnens have his wife and he was forced to comply with their demands. Yue replaces one of Duke Leto's teeth with a poison capsule, hoping that Leto will use it to kill Baron Harkonnen. Gurney is woken up and leads the counterattack as the Harkonnen forces, along with the Imperial Sardaukar troops, launch their assault. The Atreides troops are caught off guard and quickly overwhelmed by the superior numbers of the enemy. Duncan manages to kill some Sardaukar soldiers and steals an ornithopter to rescue Paul and Jessica, but they are already gone. Baron Harkonnen has promised the Bene Gesserit that he will not harm Paul or Jessica, so he sends some of his men to take them to the desert to die of exposure. Paul is able to use his Bene Gesserit training to command one of the men to remove his mother's gag. Jessica takes the opportunity to order one of the men to kill his comrade, and when she is freed, she kills two of them herself. Their ornithopter is disabled remotely, and they land safely. From a distance, Paul and Jessica witness the destruction of Arrakis. Yue meets with Baron Harkonnen and demands that the Baron fulfill his promise. The Baron agrees but then kills Yue. He then gloats over the helpless Leto, who uses the poison capsule and kills everyone in the room except the Baron, who is injured but alive. Paul and Jessica take shelter in a survival tent during a storm. Paul has visions caused by his exposure to spice. He first sees Chaney, but the visions quickly turn to images of bloody conflict and religious fanatics spreading across the galaxy under the banner of the Atreides. He blames his mother and the Bene Gesserit for what he sees but is eventually comforted by her. Paul and Jessica were saved by Duncan Idaho, the only survivor of a bloody massacre. They were taken to an abandoned terraforming station occupied by the Fremen, a group of desert dwellers. The Sardaukar, the military force of the Empire, tracked them down and launched an attack. The Fremen fought back fiercely, but Duncan sacrificed himself to allow Paul, Jessica, and Kynes to escape. Kynes set up a thumper, hoping to call a sandworm and ride it to safety. Unfortunately, the Sardaukar mortally wounded her. Just as they were about to kill her, a sandworm arrived, and Kynes attracted it to her using the drum sand. They were all swallowed by the giant worm. While navigating a sandstorm in an ornithopter, Paul had a vision of a Fremen man advising him on how to survive in the desert. He told Paul to move with the flow of the environment. Following his vision, Paul retracted the thopter's wings and allowed the storm to carry them deeper into the desert. They survived the storm, but their ornithopter was damaged, so they had to continue their journey on foot. Along the way, they were observed by the Fremen. Paul and Jessica headed toward the Fremen Siege, hoping to find sanctuary there. They attracted a sandworm and were forced to seek refuge among some nearby rocks. The sandworm lingered, studying Paul for a few seconds before being drawn away by a thumper. The Fremen captured them, and Stilgar recognized Paul. He declared that Paul was untouchable and offered to let him join their siege. However, Stilgar believed that Jessica was too old to learn to fight and must be left behind. Jessica and Paul used their Bene Gesserit training to disarm most of the Fremen and held Stilgar at knife point. Stilgar realized that Jessica was a Bene Gesserit and agreed to take both of them to the siege. Paul faced a challenge from Jamis, the man he recognized from his visions. Jamis wanted to kill Paul and Jessica and take their belongings. Stilgar offered to let Paul join the siege if he defeated Jamis in a duel. Paul agreed to fight as his mother's champion, and Chani gave him her crysknife, a weapon made from a sandworm's tooth. In the fight, Paul repeatedly held the knife to Jamis's throat, demanding that he yield. However, Stilgar informed him that Fremen duels are to death. Jessica revealed that Paul had never killed anyone before. With reluctance, Paul killed Jamis. The Fremen were satisfied and took Paul and Jessica to their siege. On their journey into the desert, Paul and Jessica witnessed a Fremen riding a live sandworm, an impossible feat. Chani told Paul that this was only the beginning of his journey. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment and let us know which film you want us to explore next. Take care.